Hi everyone. What I want to do here is talk a little bit about SGOs, see if we can streamline the process, make it a little simpler, and avoid some mistakes we've made in the past. So the first thing to focus on is when you're creating an SGO, and we'll use Bill since he's got the first name in the alphabet. You have a choice between a long SGO, which is otherwise referred to as a tiered SGO, or a short SGO. There are different reasons to use both of them. Personally, if it was up to me, I would choose a short SGO. The only big benefit I see to the long SGO is that you can have an opportunity to get a non-integer score, but you can sort of achieve the same things by doing a short SGO, and I think it's less work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the short SGO here. So just for the sake of argument, we will go ahead and we will go through and we'll create one. We go to edit, and we would want to go ahead and put in all of this information. Now, what's the big difference here? If we went and let's go back and show you, if you haven't seen it before, I'm sure you have, but if we created a long SGO, you can see that we could break things down in preparedness groups, but this is where sometimes it gets a little murky, it gets more difficult, and I don't think it really gets you the benefit for the additional effort. I'm not dissuading you from doing a long SGO if you love it, but I just want to show you how doing a short SGO can be much easier, because really what we want to do is we just want to focus on the important things. We're trying to go ahead and capture some data that show that the students are learning, and we're thinking about the process that they're going through. So since some of you are going to be new to this SGO process, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a quick sample of what this short SGO should look like filled in, and you can go ahead and use that as a exemplar for yours. So here's some of that information filled in for this SGO, the basic things, the grade, the subject, students. Down here under the standards and rationale, it's very important that you list specifically what standards that this is addressing, and you can see what we're doing here in this example is going to be meeting the performance expectation 4-PS3-2, which is on energy. If you go and look at what that performance expectation entails, it says that the students will go ahead and provide evidence of energy transfer. This is something that you'd be doing over the course of an entire year. It's not a quick hitter. So you might also want to go ahead and focus on the DCIs and the science and engineering practices. Now, in meeting this performance expectation, I'm sure you're going to be going through many more science and engineering practices than just planning and carrying out investigations, but that's the one that's highlighted here. So you can see that I referenced the DCIs there, and in this case I said basically you're going to engage in all of the SEPs to meet that standard. What they're going to do in terms of the assessment method is, this would be up to you. In this example, I'm thinking if I was doing this, I would look at student performance on a couple unit assessments in energy, and probably in meeting this performance expectation, there's probably going to be some kind of project that I'd want the students to do. So I'd go ahead and incorporate that as well. To go ahead and determine whether or not students met the SGO after I place them into their performance groups is I'd probably just go ahead and use the average scores from all of those assessments and say that that's indicative of the student performance. But once again, that's a flexible thing that's up to you. So here's where the actual wording of the SGO is. So students will demonstrate growth in their understanding of energy conservation and transfer through their performance on 3-unit tests and a project administered throughout the course. Performance targets for students are based on the average score and are as follows for each preparatory group. So, and this is arbitrary. This is something that you would have to decide. So I figure my highest preparatory group, this would be my highest achieving students. The expectation is that they would be at a level of an A. My mid group would be at a level of B, and my lower group would be at a level of a C. Hopefully I'm not targeting for any students to basically be in the D or under range. Remember, these are targets. These are where you want your students to get to, and this is where you're working to get your students to get to. You may be thinking, oh, well, I'll have a couple kids that'll fail. That's one of the things about the SGO. We're trying to push student achievement. So really, when we target, we want all students to pass and to pass well. The baseline data. How did I put the students in the preparatory groups? Well, this is where the multiple measures comes in. You know your students. You have about 6 to 8 weeks of school. I mean, the SGOs really should be wrapping them up by the 3rd week of October, but they're not. The principals won't submit them to the central office until the end of October. So you've got a long time to work with these students and decide where they are. So you should, during that period of time, you're getting to know them. You're probably going to administer some quizzes. Maybe you'll administer a couple tests. They'll be doing homework. They'll be participating in class. You'll be working with them, and you'll start getting a sense of, as we know every year, where these students are. So, that's what I would use to go ahead and determine my preparedness groups. That is a document that you would just sort of keep for yourself, and you can make it very formal and upload it, but at some point you should have a listing of which prep group each student is in. But the specific indicators of what goes into that essentially could just sort of be check boxes, like students turning in homework, check; students participating in class, check, or X. Their average score on the first 3 quizzes is this. All these things to indicate to you, where you think that student's going to go ahead and achieve. Down a little lower here, and this is something that's been confusing for some people. We want to try and clear it up here. The target score, this is what you want your students to do. So this is how you determine whether or not your students met your objective. Now, since I'm using preparedness groups, and this is where it blurs the line with a tiered or a long SGO, because that's what a tiered SGO is doing. It's using different preparedness groups, but I'll show you later how we're going to keep this into the more simple format. This says, it basically reiterates what's up here, and you probably wouldn't have to list this again, but I did just to make it explicit that the students in prep group A will get 90, B, C, etc. So over here on the right are the indicators for the score that you receive, whether it be highly effective or lower than that. And the targets for this are defined, they're going to be defined by the department, and they should be consistent throughout the department. I think they're going to end up being defined and consistent throughout the district. But when I reviewed the SGOs from last year, I saw that 80 to 90% of you, that's where I got these numbers from. 85% or greater for highly effective, 75, 65, and then less than 65. Let's see how we go ahead and can calculate that. Because remember, this is based on the total number of students, and in each preparedness group the targets might be different. So here's a spreadsheet. It may look complicated, but it's really not. And this is a form that I took from another district and inputted the things that you see over here. Just put them in there. Not something that you have to use, but I can make this available to you. This is what we're interested in. This is where the data is, and you would of course use your real student names. And then here I've assigned them to whatever prep group that they're at based on my pre-assessment data. And here I've defined what the learning target is for each prep group, and this is actually done through a formula. So if I change the prep group for the student, it'll automatically change. Then I go ahead and put in my post-assessment score. For this SGO, I said it would probably be an average, so this is just a single score. It makes it pretty easy. So I enter in that data, and then I have another equation to determine whether or not I've met my SGO. And so basically all this equation does is it says, okay, what prep group is the kid in? The kid's in prep group 2, meaning that they should do at least 80, and if 92 is greater than 80, they met the SGO. And it does it again and again and again. And then at the bottom, it adds up all the students. So it knows that there are 42 students in this data sheet, and it counts up and finds out that there are 35 yeses, and so that means that 83% of the students met the SGO. Don't pay attention to that. So you'd go back and you'd say, 83% of my students met the SGO. It came very close, but my SGO would be considered effective in that instance as more than 75% of the students met the target score. So you're in this case, you're basically getting the benefit of doing this long tiered SGO in the fact that you're able to differentiate your students and realize that you have different groups of students who should have different targets for success, but you have this more simple form of determining what the final SGO score is. And lastly, I just want to show you some of the files that we're going to need you'll be required to go ahead and upload in order to complete your SGO. Initially, when you first turn it in, the only thing that we're looking for is going to be the baseline data. And this is where you'll have the student names and the indication of how you put them into each preparedness group. And then if you have your assessment tools ready to go, you can go ahead and upload at that point, but we realize that you may be defining and refining some of those at the point at which you'll be submitting your SGO, so you can always upload those later. And then when the SGO is all done, of course, we'll need you to upload the final student assessment data. That could go ahead and look, something like this. I can make the sheet available to you, or you can do something that's a little bit different format or simpler. If you have any questions, remember you can always go ahead and go to the SGO guidebook. The only real places I would look at in the SGO guidebook are from pages 7 to 10. That's where it basically overviews the important points of the SGO process. But I hope that this was helpful to you. Really, since some of you, this will be your first time doing SGOs and T-eval, hopefully this gives you a starting point to go from. And those of you that were confused about what my expectations were, it's really, I'm really trying to simplify the process. And if you find a way to work with me to make the process even more simple, I greatly appreciate it. Love to hear it. We can go ahead and talk about these things further, but the message I have for you in the end is SGOs should not be a source of angst. We need to move away from this process of I give the kids a pre-assessment test where they score 0.2%. It's a ridiculous waste of our time. Do something that makes more sense for us. That's why I really think that this preparedness grouping idea with using multiple measures to define where kids are instead of giving them an arbitrary chest of information that they don't know. Remember, the pre-assessments that the state talked about, they are really good at giving, pre-assessment is really good if you're in a continuation subject. So if you're in a second grade teacher and you have data about the reading level of a student at the beginning of the year, because you can test that with a pre-assessment, and then at the end of the year you give them another assessment and you see if their reading level's gone up or down, that's great. It doesn't work in science. It does not work well, at least. So remember, the state was coming out with a one-size-fits-all SGO, and that's why we're in the situation we're in. So I'm strongly encouraging you to move away from the pre-assessment where everybody fails and get into this preparedness groups and just coming up with good assessments for our students that show that you're doing a great job as teachers, because we know you are. Take care. If you have any questions, reach out.